Okay, everyone. I want to welcome you to another live stream, which is a Financial Freedom Friday. And this stream will also be streamed on the podcast channel and serve as the next episode of the Side Hustler Society podcast. In this episode, we're going to be talking about confidence, how that translates to success in freelancing, but really life in general. This episode was kind of partially inspired by a Veggie Artists meetup that I recently hosted about a month ago, and if G Wiz is wishing is listening, I'm gonna give him a shout out. But we were talking a little after the meetup. It's kind of being known as the Veggie Hours After Party, and I was talking to someone else, and I had mentioned that I did a few things in the past, including mixed martial arts. And G Wiz kind of overheard me, and he was curious about like, well, that's the story that needs to be told, and this ties into confidence, but the reason I bring that up is there's a lot of, well, I'll put it this way. People see you as you are once you become successful, but they don't see what you were. They don't see the process you went through. And a lot of times, there's nothing unique about that process. If you go through the same process, you can come out on the other side too. It just comes down to sharing the process so that you can benefit from it too. Because for me, I used to be what most people would describe when I was younger as kind of phobic. I was willing to get out and do things, but I would be kind of nervous, shaking while I'm doing it. And obviously, that's not going to be appropriate if you're going to be doing any kind of entrepreneurship or freelancing, or just, if we're going to be honest, getting any kind of success in life in general. So there's a step or a process that I followed to gain more confidence in myself, which has led to where I am today. And that's what I'm going to be sharing with y'all in this live stream. Just like every other Financial Freedom Friday, I will be sticking around for questions afterwards. But for now, we're going to go ahead and play the podcast. And if you have any questions, just leave them in the chat. I'll be addressing them in the chat. And if you want to come on the show towards the end of the podcast and ask your question, we can do that and have a dialogue. So, with that being said, let's go ahead and get the podcast portion started. Like I said, feel free to drop your questions in the chat.
To the Side Hustlers Society podcast, the place where you can find out more about the hustles that are best for you. And of course, make more money in the process. Elijah has been in the gig economy and freelance space for over 8 years and has done over 4,000 deliveries on Uber Eats. Has several video editing clients, many properties on Airbnb, runs multiple YouTube channels, and is the author of the best-selling book, The Anatomy of Financial Success. It's his mission to empower people with the tools needed to be successful. Now, welcome your host, the king of the side hustles, Elijah Bilel.
Sup, everyone. Welcome back to the Side Hustler Society. We are now in season 2, which will be focusing on lead generation for your business or for your services if you are a freelancer, like a lot of y'all are. So, with that being the case, I'm really excited for this show because there's some emotional fundamentals that I personally feel like everyone who is going to be in business for themselves needs to have down before we can really talk about lead generation. For those of y'all that don't know, let's break down what a lead is. So, a lead is basically a prospect for a service or something in your business, and then you have to talk to them to convince them to buy your product or service. Over the course of the season, we'll get into what different types of leads are, cold leads, hot leads, that kind of thing. But before we do any of that, I want to tackle a topic I like to call boldness. We're going to get into the anatomy of financial success. For those of y'all that don't know, that is actually the name of my book, my best-selling book that deals with personal finance. And there's a whole section in there. Losing my voice, so y'all bear with me. But there's a whole section in there that talks about income, the different types of income you can make, and also what personality traits come into play when it comes to certain types of income and what you can do to change it if they're not working in your favor. And when it comes to income generation, boldness is actually one of 6 attributes that you need to be thinking about when it comes to personal finance and income. And we're not going to talk about the other 5 in this show. We're going to be talking about boldness because if you, let's say if I could give you all the leads on the planet and they're like sizzling hot, all you have to do is the simplest of sales pitches to close them per se. It won't matter if you don't have a level of boldness. You won't be able to close them because you'll be too afraid to call. You'll be too afraid to give your presentation. You'll be too afraid to do anything. And this is something that a lot of people in, I'll say, business, they aren't really taught because we're emotionally conditioned to be employees from the time we're brought up, unless you're born in some entrepreneur family. And even then, the school system is always pushing you in the employee direction. That's why we're going to tackle this issue head on when it comes to bonus. So, like usual, for those of y'all that are watching me on the, I guess for the most part, everyone's watching videos. To Spotify is now a video platform too. But you'll see me looking to the right because I will be looking at notes during this whole podcast. So bear with me when it comes to that. So we're going to pull up the personality report that you can actually get for temporarily for free. If you click on the link in the description or in the pinned comment, Financial Anatomy actually has a personality report where once you get it, you take a questionnaire and you can figure out which one of the 6 personalities you are. And depending on which personality you are, you'll find out where on the boldness scale you rate. So you'll have something to work with. So we're going to pull up a little portion of that to give a description of boldness. Let's see. There we are. I'm just going to read. And once again, this is part of the personality report that you can get at the sidehustlersociety.com. Link in the description and the pinned comment. Boldness. The ability for someone to use their ability to take risks, confront their fears financially, and be confident. This also speaks to the ability to do things that others are often afraid of but yield good financial results. Someone with a boldness score below 3 has trouble taking risks that offer big financial rewards. Someone with a boldness score of 3 is comfortable taking a moderate level of risk as long as it offers a decent financial reward. Someone who has a boldness score of above 3 is emotionally conditioned to do things that are considered high risk or outside of the comfort zones of most people. They accelerate at taking these risks so that they can get the big financial gains that they have to offer. So we're going to go ahead and exit out of that, stop sharing. So there's some key points we're going to take away from that. First off, boldness is your ability to actually handle rejection. So if I walk up to someone and I start talking to them about whatever, and they're not interested in talking, if they just blow me off to my face, how do I feel afterwards? Well, I might feel a certain way, but my ability to keep doing that over and over until I find the right person that I'm meant to serve plays a role in how much boldness that I have. And the good news is there's things you can do to raise this in yourself, which we're going to talk about later. But that's important to note. In fact, a lot of people don't bring this up, but when it comes to rejection, you're going to have a problem with this in sales if you have not resolved your communication skills with the opposite sex. I say that because essentially your hesitance to approach people, it comes from one of 3 things, or it could be all 3. You either don't have confidence in yourself to adapt to a situation emotionally, you don't have confidence in your communication skills, or like we discovered, you're too insecure in yourself to handle rejection. And if you have any problem with any of those 3 things, usually you're having problems with the opposite sex. So what you're going to find out is there's actually a natural correlation between dealings with the opposite sex and sales and being able to handle rejection. I thought I would just throw that out there. It's more of a philosophical thing. I guess it's not directly applicable, but I want to tell you that parallel because when you solve one, you solve the other. So put them in the same category. The other thing that was mentioned was risk taking. So being able to handle rejection, close leads, talk to people, there's a degree of quote unquote risk in that because, especially in today's society, if we're going to be honest, but the risk comes from your ability to handle that rejection and being able to feel and experience it if you have to and not have it phase you. But this is actually a good stepping stone to other things that are pretty big. A lot of people, for an example, have a phobia of public speaking. And public speaking is, in a lot of ways, the next level of sales, but you're not going to get there if you can't even do one-on-one sales. So you can see this as a stepping stone that allows you to take greater risks. Moving on, it's also the ability to persevere. That's kind of self-explanatory. Now that we've covered what boldness is, it's important to know that certain personality types will have this gift of gab when it comes to boldness over others. So, swinging back to the anatomy of financial success, for those of y'all that have your personality report, the sniper, the king of the hill, and the fame seeker naturally have high boldness. So, this is something that they are more or less born with. They just have to cultivate or just redirect in the direction. And the builder, the conservative, and to a lesser degree, the preserver have lower boldness. So this is something they'll need to work on if they want to achieve their financial success. Just like the other personalities that I mentioned have weaknesses in other areas that they need to work on. But since we're talking about boldness, that's something to keep in mind. This is a big part here. But in order to be bold, you have to have an outcome to be bold towards. So if you haven't actually evaluated what you want financially, and the method on how you're going to get there, you can't really engage emotionally. So if you want to make, I'll just throw a number out there, $100,000 a year, and if you determine that, I'll use this example, you're a video editor and you want to make $100,000 a year, and you determine that you need X amount of clients in order to do that. Well, now you can put together a system to generate the leads, and then you got to close those leads with the sales system. You see how you've identified a path, and now you have everything you need to actually be bold towards. Obviously, there's a lot of things that happen in between you making that $100,000 and you starting, but you have the path set and you can go from there. If you don't do that, you're going to find it very, very, very hard to be courageous or to be bold. So you want to make sure you actually have a plan and a path to line out with. Now, it doesn't have to be like step by step by step. The steps can come as you learn more about your industry, but at least have an end game in mind so your emotions can actually be engaged. Very important. So next, we're going to talk about some things that you can do to develop this. But I have a personal story that I'm going to share, and I'm going to share this because one, I think it's a teachable moment, but two, for those of y'all that don't know, I have a group called the Veggie Outers, meant for people who are vegan or interested in the vegan lifestyle to help them eat more plants and eat less meat. We go to various vegan restaurants and review them on a scale of 1 to 10. And lately, we've been having somewhat of an after party afterwards. I mean, we'll go and review the restaurant in that last few hours, and then people go home after that. And there's been a section of us that have been kind of hanging out afterwards, whether it be somewhere else or outside the restaurant. And we end up talking about a lot of things. And I'm starting to enjoy those after parties more than the actual meetup, to be honest. But when we got to talking, I did briefly share with someone that I used to do MMA. And someone that I just met recently at the Bit Summit, Gregory's known as G Wiz. I talked about his channel in the Bit Summit panel. That was the last episode of the last season, so be sure to check him out. But he overheard me because there's like 3 conversations going on to give y'all a visual. So there's 3 conversations of 3, and I'm in one of those 3 conversations. He was in another conversation, but overheard me say that I used to do MMA. And then he said, well, wait, Elijah used to do mixed martial arts. I mean, that's a story that needs to be told. I told him, oh, well, yeah. The reason I did it is in my early days, this is even before I wrote The Anatomy of Financial Success. And before I even technically got on YouTube, even before the app lifestyle, which was called the Uber lifestyle back then, so way back then, there's this personal trainer that put me up on a lot of game. And he told me that I had the sales skills, but there's a part of me that's still in my comfort zone, and I'm not going to reach my full potential until I do something drastic. And they said, I recommend you get involved in MMA because it's going to bring the aggressiveness out of you to take yourself to the next level. And you're not going to believe me right now, but once you do this, there's going to be a new Elijah that's going to be born. So I actually took his advice, and I went and did MMA for about 6 months. And he was right. A new Elijah was born. My confidence level just went out the roof. And my testosterone level was actually inflated. Now, for those of y'all that don't know, I hate to get into biology, but I'm gonna keep it brief. But men get testosterone boosts from like eating meat in society. And if you're on a vegan diet like me, you're producing your own testosterone with your male organs and certain spots in your body. And that's testosterone that's being produced by yourself is more potent in terms of what you feel than these testosterone boosts that you get from eating meat. So during that time frame, I did so much work and I didn't really care about like just things to like video games, like stuff that would just distract me from whatever it is I wanted. I grew, in fact, let's go ahead and pull some screenshots up, or let's just share the screen to give y'all a visual of some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So we're gonna go to the veggieouters.com. And initially the Veggieouters was just, I want to say like around like 11 or 12 people per meetup, but I wanted it to be a lot bigger. So I designed this website myself. I went to various events to quote unquote recruit more people for the Facebook group. And the meetup started getting between 15 to 20, sometimes 25 people per meetup. This is also when we started doing things like giveaways, like doing other types of events, so that people, and as you can see, I had the t-shirts designed for the Veggie Outers too. But yeah, this is when the group massively expanded and morphed into what we see today. Let's exit out of that. And and of course, the part y'all have been waiting for, but I did start the Uber lifestyle, which is what it was called back in the day. My first YouTube channel. Then Uber went and changed some things with their terms of service, saying, "Hey, we don't care if you're affiliated with us. You can't use the word Uber in anything." So I changed it to the app lifestyle, and eventually, once I expanded outside of apps to make money, it was rebranded to the Side Hustler Society, which you're watching right now. But all that was started while I was doing MMA. I also wrote The Anatomy of Financial Success in about 9 months. And I didn't know anything about writing a book, but I didn't let that stop me. I mean, I already knew that if you write a book, it's a great conduit to launch another business, which in that case was going to be Financial Anatomy. There's a great book that shows a great blueprint on how to write and launch a book. It's published by Chandler Bolt, The Proven Method from Blank Page to 10,000 Copies Sold. I actually highly recommend that if you're going to write a book. Now, he does heavily try and upsell you on this course version of it. I didn't take his course on how to write a book, to be fair, so I can't really comment on it. But I can vouch for the book, and I follow the steps in the book with some improving and changing of things here and there to kind of fit my YouTuber style to take advantage of certain things that I have going for me. And yeah, the book became an Amazon bestseller. But I'm bringing this all back to the point that all this stemmed from me doing MMA, and it really made me a different person. I wasn't one of those people that was like highly introverted. I don't want y'all to get the wrong opinion. I've always been like a omnivert, ambivert, or whatever it is called in between. But if you want to get real technical, because some people say that's a cop out. There's no such thing as that. You're either introverted or extroverted. I'm not gonna pull this. Well, I am. Type talk. So this is the book that really shows how introverted or extroverted you are based on like a personality test back in the day. Well, it still applies, but get in there. But yeah, I've actually read that and taken the test, and for the life of me, I can't remember which interval I am or digit. Funny, I remember I have my zodiac memorized and various different astrologies across the world, but I can't remember the 4 letters I am. But my point is, that book says that I'm 40% extroverted, 60% introverted. So I can go back and forth between the two. But the key thing is, as long as I can go back to my quote unquote comfort zone at the end of it and recharge. And we're going to get into that later when I go into sociality in another podcast. But there's ways you can increase that too. But let's stay on topic. So yeah, you could say that my whole quote unquote online career was launched through a big act of boldness. I still remember, sparring with people who were not twice my size, but they were bigger than me. But because I have more lean muscle mass, I could overpower them. It brings back memories. I'm actually kind of flirting with the idea of going back and doing it maybe later next year, because this is the end of 2024. So that'd be 2025. But I'm telling you this story because this plays a role in how you can develop this boldness. We're going to circle back to this MMA stuff in a sec. But first, we're going to talk about what I like to call the 3 C's of boldness: constitution, confidence, and charisma. And it all starts or stems from the self image or how you view yourself. The This lack of confidence, the lack of boldness has its roots in how you view yourself. You don't view yourself as someone that's capable of doing certain feats. And a way to enhance the self image of yourself is by actually doing things that may not be related to what you're scared of, but you've always been afraid of doing them. And by conquering that fear, you'll find that what you were scared of doing is on the road to you getting the outcome you want actually isn't so bad. I mean, look at what I just told you. MMA has nothing to do with becoming financially successful, making six figures, helping young adults achieve their financial destiny. That's nothing to do with any of that. Yet the results of me getting involved in it rippled to the point to where I was able to conquer my fears and do a lot of things on the road to being able to serve y'all better. That's what I mean by that. So now that we've covered that, the question is, how do you change that self-image about yourself, how you feel about yourself? Well, first thing is the 3 C's that we talked about. So we're going to talk about constitution. So using Google, we are just going to Google what constitution means. And no, I'm not talking about the US Constitution. I'm not talking about this. For those of y'all that are looking, I'm not talking about the American Constitution. Let's get that out of your head right now. Like, we're not getting patriotic up in here. No, we're talking about this. So when you Google a person's constitution, this is AI, but it's pretty much the definition. A person's constitution is their physical makeup, particularly their health, strength, and appearance. For example, someone with a strong constitution is unlikely to get sick often. So yeah, essentially, we're going to play around with that a little because we're going to apply that to the concept of achieving our goals and the boldness. So we're not necessarily talking about like physical strength or your health and well-being, although if you are sick, that could play a role in how you feel about yourself. But the thing is, you'll get better and then you can bounce back from that. Let's talk about more of a social constitution. So when you're interacting with people and you need to convey a point, you may be nervous and you may doubt yourself, and that causes you to not want to engage in it. So, the first level of achieving high boldness is actually to conquer having a weak constitution. To give an example of someone that has a weak constitution, take someone in a social environment, and I'm pretty sure we've seen this in some cases, just like observing, or you may have actually been part of the conversation. But in like a group setting where everyone is kind of talking and having a good time, you have someone that's just kind of sitting there, just not wanting to interact, who's just kind of awkward, right? And when someone talks to them, it could be you that decides to talk to them, try and bring them in the conversation. They seem nervous, they seem awkward, like they just have these one-worded responses like yes or no, and they might be like shaking. Well, that's an example of someone that has a weak constitution. By contrast, let's say if someone has a decent or strong constitution, believe it or not, this may be a person that can actually get up and do some public speaking. In fact, public speaking is a good conduit to convey these points. So we're going to actually stick with public speaking. Someone who has a strong constitution can actually get up and do public speaking. And yeah, they may feel a little nervous, but they don't necessarily come off nervous or shaky or anything like that. They're just getting their point across, but they're not coming off necessarily confident either. It's just, hey, I have the ability to stand up here and talk to y'all. And I'm talking to y'all with the best of my ability at this time. I'm not fumbling or anything like that, but it's not the most confident thing. It's the first level of boldness, and that's the first level you want to get to, is having a strong constitution. The next level of boldness is confidence. So just like constitution, we'll Google confidence. So I'm going to type in confidence, and then we're going to share that on the screen, just like Constitution. Confidence is the feeling of being sure of yourself and your abilities in a realistic and secure way. Pretty simple, right? I do think the word confidence is overused, so that's why I wanted to go to the fundamentals of what the word actually means. But one thing that Google's not saying that a lot of people don't actually talk about is someone that is very confident, they have this ability to project their emotions and their mindset into people they're talking to, whether it be a group or whether it be a one-on-one. So let's go ahead and stick with our example of public speaking. Take the Constitution person, move them to the side, and bring up someone else to the stage that has high confidence. Well, this person, not only will they not come off as nervous or anything like that, but they have a way of engaging with you that you actually feel them, you feel their intent, you feel their emotions. Like there's power behind every single word that they say. And before you know it, their point starts to come across in a different way from, oh, well, I just intellectually understand what they're saying. You start to feel what they're saying too, which in turn helps you absorb the information better and help you make a decision on, if you're going to buy whatever they're going to be selling. Because most people aren't going to be talking just for the fun of it. They want you to buy something. But that in itself is a skill set, and it's a reflection of the level of boldness they have at that time. And this last level of boldness, and we're going to get to how to develop these in a sec, because I know a lot of y'all are like, you're pointing this out, but how can I develop the stuff? Don't worry, it's coming up. So the last branch of boldness, and it actually throws in a little sociality in there too. So I'm not going to cover it heavy in this podcast, but I want to mention it. But it's charisma. So what does charisma mean? Well, let's go ahead and Google it. Okay. So charisma, compelling attractiveness or charm that can inspire devotion in others. Simple enough, right? Now, I call charisma charming confidence. Essentially, that's all it is. As you're conveying and talking to people, you're conveying your points, your ability to put a smile on their face. There's a variety of ways that you can actually do this. It's not just one stereotypical way. Probably the most common way, which is the way that I excel at, is engaging people's emotions by throwing jokes in your presentation or just being jovial in general. That causes people to smile and it makes you charismatic. But another way is actually just putting a smile on someone's face just by your body language. Some people have this hypnotic like stuff going on where they could smile a certain way or they have a certain pose that they hit. And by doing that, it throws a smile on people's face, and that counts as charisma too. Now, we're not going to go heavy into this here because it's more on the sociality podcast I'm going to be doing, which is another attribute that you're going to want to develop if you're going to be able to generate leads. But I'm just planting that seed so we can water it later. Let's get into how to develop these. So now that we have the 3 C's down, that being constitution, confidence, and charisma, you want to have some self-awareness and just check off which one do you feel like you're at this time, and be honest with yourself. Some of y'all might be at the first level, which is you need to develop a strong constitution. Some of y'all may be a little further down the path, and you need to just build the confidence, but you don't have any problem actually stepping into the light and doing what you need to do, but you can't do it confidently yet. And some of y'all may be at the charismatic stage where you just want to work on the charisma. Because when you reach the charismatic stage, we need to develop that. You can actually achieve a lot just by staying in the confidence level stage. That's usually enough to be sufficient, to be honest. The charismatic stage of boldness is if you really want to take things to the next level and achieve like wealth, achieve a following, and really scale whatever you're trying to do. So the charismatic stage actually isn't mandatory. That's important to just put that out there. You don't have to be. You can stay at that confidence level, but be honest with yourself and check off where you at this time. Now that those have been established, think of those as like the 3C ladder, if you will. As you're climbing the ladder of wanting to achieve your goals via increasing your boldness, you'll eventually reach the constitution ladder of that ladder. And as you keep going up, keep developing, you'll hit the confidence level. As you keep developing, you'll reach the charismatic level. I will reiterate once again that this podcast about boldness covers an attribute that we talk about in the financial personality report. You can get that at www.thesidehustlersociety.com by clicking the link in the description or in the pinned comment. That way you can see not just which areas need to work on, if it's boldness or if it's something else. You can actually see what those are, and you can get a solution on how to develop those. Speaking of develop, we're going to go into how to develop your boldness. But before we can do that, you need to make what I call a phobia list. So we all have fears, okay? And if we're going to be honest, boldness comes from confronting your fears and getting in the habit of confronting your fears. Because the more fears that you conquer, and then you're no longer afraid of doing that, the more bold you're going to be in future endeavors. This is what builds your self image so that you see yourself as a person who will be able to do some of that stuff that you want that's in the way of you achieving your financial outcome. And we're sticking with lead generation in this podcast for this season. So that means ultimately in sales. So if you've been following the broadcast so far, you have a goal in mind and what is your methodology on how you're going to achieve it. If you have not done so, you need to write down what is your financial goal, what is the skill set that you developed, whether it's your video editing, graphic design, whether you mow lawns or whatever. So that will be the skill set you bring to the market. And how many clients or what do you need to do to make that amount of money? So that amount of money that you want to make on an annual basis, you need to divide it by 12. That'll give you how much you need to be making on a monthly basis eventually. And once you have that income in mind, that'll inform you how many clients you need to have at any given time to be making that money. Now you have something to strive for when it comes to getting out there, getting the clients, raising your boldness in order to do this so your emotions can actually grab onto something. But once you've done that, you'll probably find that some of the stuff you're hesitant to do, some of the stuff you may be scared to do, some of the stuff you may actually be phobic of doing. So this is what I like to call the phobia list. So when I say write these things down, you can also use your phone. You could jot it down in your notes section on your phone. Just keep that in mind. But you want to write down 4 categories. Those 4 categories are somewhat comfortable, very uncomfortable, extremely uncomfortable, and phobic. And once you write those categories down, leave space under each category because you're going to be writing down things that fit in each category. So as you learn more about your industry, more about yourself, when you get out there and try and do some of the things that people are talking about, that I'm going to be talking about later in this podcast, you may find that you're scared of some things. And, there's nothing wrong with being scared, but don't let it hold you back from achieving your goal. But anytime you're scared of something, you want to actually put it in one of these 4 categories. So if you feel yourself being hesitant about anything, I do mean anything, this in your way of achieving your financial goal, once you set that path that we've talked about, you need to write it down in one of these categories. So I'll give you an example of myself. Pre-mixed martial arts, I was somewhat uncomfortable just talking to, strangers. Now, it wasn't something that I was phobic about because I've always, to some degree, been kind of social, but there was just a little uncomfortability when I have to go up and talk to a complete stranger because they are a complete stranger. So that would go in my somewhat uncomfortable section. For some of y'all, it may be higher. Be honest with yourself. And if it's higher, go ahead and put it in this appropriate category. An example of something that made me very uncomfortable initially when it came to making money online is actually making YouTube videos, believe it or not. It's more so the idea of talking to this camera and no one is reciprocating like I'm doing right now. It can be perceived as like awkward. Like there's no back and forth. I'm talking to like this camera that's is lifeless, not saying anything back. So that takes some getting used to. It actually made me very uncomfortable at first. And you can see this in my first video that I appeared on camera on this channel. So go back to oldest videos. I believe that video is 10 things that every rideshare driver should know. There's a video I appeared on camera before then, but I was only on camera like 60 seconds, so I don't count that. That was a video where I was on camera for the full time, and I was stiff as hell. You could tell I was uncomfortable because wasn't talking to anyone. So I would label that very uncomfortable initially. Well, clearly that's not the case now. Otherwise, I wouldn't be making so many videos. An example of something that made me extremely uncomfortable is public speaking. I think most people fall in that category. There's very few people that initially public speaking is somewhat uncomfortable. Like most people, it's either extremely uncomfortable or it's phobic. So I wouldn't say phobic. It's not that far from me, but it is extremely uncomfortable for me at that time. And it would be to the point where if I had to get up and talk to people, you know how you get up and then like you feel like this adrenaline rushing through your body, like right here in the stomach area. That's your adrenal glands, like spitting out a bunch of adrenaline because you're thinking about like, oh, what if I mess up or something like that, or I've never done this before, which it's reflecting that self-image that we talked about. Right. And then you get up there and yeah, all that's kind of affected you. So you might be stumbling and bumbling. Well, yeah, that's what made it extremely uncomfortable for me. But once you get through the habit of doing it, this starts to decrease until it's just not there anymore. And lastly, something that I was actually phobic about is I didn't actually notice about myself until I got in this position, but I was kind of phobic of heights, to be honest. So the first time I went ziplining, it was at an event in Houston called a Vegan Vibes, and they had different activities you could do there, like miniature golf and rock climbing and ziplining. And that ziplining looked fun. So me and my friend Travis went over there, like, let's go and do it. And I got up there, and as I got up there, I started noticing I was getting like real, like internally, like scared, right? And then I'm up there, I'm like, wow, this stuff is higher than I thought. And I'm thinking of this while the person is strapping me in, so I'll be able to do it. I was just having this conversation, like, do I ever want to do this? And when they finished, I was like, you know what? Forget this shit. Then I jumped off, and it was fun as heck. In fact, how about I show y'all that video since I am talking about it? Didn't plan on bringing that up, but I think y'all like it. It's this is on Facebook. It's the picture that the video that Travis took of me when I was ziplining.
I.E. That was fun.
So, yeah, that was fun once I was in the process, but it actually took, some guts to actually jump off that thing, even if I was, tied up and safe and nothing was going to happen. But yeah, I didn't realize that I was phobic of heights. And since then, I've done other things that involve heights that I'm not scared of anymore. So these are some examples within myself to help inform your phobia list. So go through the process. And this is an ongoing thing where, like, it's not like everything on this list is going to be the only thing you'll be quote unquote afraid of as you work to achieve your goals. The further you get along, you may find that other things are required, and you may find yourself hesitating to do it. And anytime you hesitate to do something, that's actually a sign that you're scared. The only exception is if you are lacking some type of tool and you need to get that tool, then you can't do it because you don't have the tools. But assuming you have the tools, if you're hesitating to do it, it's usually because you're scared. And sometimes this can kind of cover itself up as laziness, like, oh, I'm probably being lazy. But truth be told, a lot of times laziness is a sign of the first level, which is, well, this makes you somewhat uncomfortable. The only exception is if you've already done it before, then you actually are being lazy. Get off your butt and do it. But if you've never done it before and you're hesitating and you think it's lazy, it's probably because you're a little scared of it. Not like at the phobic level, but you might be at the one of the first two, which is either somewhat uncomfortable or very uncomfortable. So just keep that in mind and write it on your list. So now that that's been said, let's get into how to develop these. So I shared the MMA story at the beginning on purpose. Like I said, because that's the way of most people are scared of, any kind of physical confrontation. I mean, I was scared initially too, but By learning how to fight, not only do I feel better about myself as a man, because that's, as far as I'm concerned, every man should do that as part of manhood or initiation. That had a spillover effect. In fact, the three C's I talked about, that kind of allowed me to skip Constitution in general and go straight to the middle of the confidence level because it brought out that aggressiveness in me. And that's what I'm actually about when it comes to developing boldness. You see, that phobic list that we talked about, you can steadily work your way up it. So instead of doing something that you're extremely scared of, like, or that you're phobic of, you can start out by doing those smaller things, like the things that make you somewhat uncomfortable. That builds your boldness up. Then you tackle the things that make you very uncomfortable. That builds your boldness up. Then you take a bigger step, which is going to be harder, but you've come this far, do some of the stuff that makes you extremely uncomfortable. And then eventually you reach the time where you do the stuff that you're phobic about that's in the way of you achieving your undertaking. You can do that. But the stuff that about to talk about now, it's like a hack that allows you to just kind of skip some of the smaller stuff and start with extremely uncomfortable to phobic. And then once you do that stuff, everything else on the list is like that. There's nothing. It's easy. So the MMA, if you're a man, I would actually consider doing it. And if you don't prefer MMA than boxing, I would do either MMA, UFC, or boxing, and it brings that aggressiveness out of you. But for those of y'all that like Elijah, I don't want to get punched in the face. Or for the ladies, listen, like, well, what about us? I'm not about to do no MMA. I got y'all covered too. So one thing that, and this is actually real good for the conservative personality in terms of financial anatomy. But one thing that can bring boldness out of you that is more emotionally flowing, it's not so much cutting off your emotions, is a type of professional dancing. And when I say professional dancing, I mean like literally those dance classes where you go in there, you do a class, and y'all perform somewhere. Like the perform thing is very important because dancing behind the scenes, it's fine, but you want to do something that's gonna require you and your teams to actually perform. Just Google it. It's not that hard to find. I'm not gonna give any local examples because it just requires the little research on your behalf. But if you get involved in something like that, that's a way of raising your boldness too, because you're having to do something physically in front of other people, and it's something you're inhibited about. A lot of people are inhibited about their ability to dance, and that comes from them lacking boldness. That's a way of developing it. Another thing you could do is just get in the habit of confronting your fears in general. And we talked about working up your way up the phobia list. So that's basically this method. But in your everyday living, like some of the hobbies y'all take in for fun, why don't you try some of the more, for lack of a better word, risque hobbies that make you scared? A good example is the zip lining thing that I told you about. But that is actually a good example of a hobby that requires you to have a level of boldness to even do. And then once you've done that a few times, it's like, well, some of the stuff that I was scared of in my everyday life, it's just not, I'm not scared of it anymore. Another example is there is this circus class or class that shows you how to do these tricks that people do in the circus up in the air. And I took a class on that about 2 years ago. And I'd already did the zip lining at this point. So when I got up there, I wasn't phobic about it. It had been reduced to maybe somewhat uncomfortable, but the fun when I'm in the air completely overpowers the like, oh, well, I'm a little uncomfortable actually jumping off the edge. But let's go and share this because I had someone film me while I was doing this.
Oh, wait, that's a live view?
Well, that's me up there.
I wonder if that's like broadcasting. If people could just like log in and be like, hey, I wonder what they're up to right now.
Okay, so that's just a visual example of some of the stuff that I'm talking about. And there's a stereotypical stuff you see in the movies too, like like snow diving and stuff like that. Y'all know these activities, which like you watch on TV or movies, like, oh yeah, I would never do that. No, I'm too scared. Why don't you actually try doing some of that stuff? Then when you come back to quote unquote the real world, some of that stuff on your list, you'll notice you're less scared of it. So it allows you to kind of hack your phobia list, and it doesn't get rid of everything. It's like everything moves down a tier or two. So the stuff that you were phobic about, it moves down to the point where like, okay, I'm just very uncomfortable about it. The stuff that you were extremely uncomfortable about, it moves down to like you being somewhat uncomfortable. And if you do stuff like that on a regular basis, which I'm not saying you gotta do it on a regular basis, but maybe 3 or 4 times a year, just make sure you do some stuff like that. It's good just for your overall maintenance of confidence level, if you will. You'll find that eventually this list, everything will start moving under very uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable. And to be honest, those 2 levels are the levels where like honestly you can do it. You don't want to, but you can do it. The ones above that, the extremely uncomfortable and the phobic, that's the one where the fear overtakes your desire to achieve your outcome, and you're just kind of stuck and you're standing still. If you can move that stuff under the very uncomfortable or somewhat uncomfortable, then this is when you can keep moving forward regardless of if you feel scared. And essentially, that's what the MMA did for me. It never fully went away in terms of the quote unquote boldness. Now, I'm not gonna lie, being in shape and staying in MMA, obviously there's a level of boldness that's just gonna stay with me 100%. But I've retained 70% of that. But if I really want to, and that's why I'm kind of flirting with getting back involved in it. If I was still in MMA, like this the phobic list, the phobic list, I'll call it, probably wouldn't even exist to start with. That stuff, it just has you being fearless. But I digress. But with that being said, that brings us to the end of today's podcast. Okay, everyone. So we are finished with the podcast section of the Financial Freedom Friday. If you have any questions or comments, drop them in the chat. And I've dropped the link, so if you want to come on the show, feel free to join me. Overall, when it comes to boldness, obviously I use the word confidence because that's what most people interpret as boldness. It really is a habit. That's what I want to think in. You let things hold you back from achieving what you want to achieve because you're not in the habit of confronting your fears. Just get in the habit of just confronting the smaller stuff, and you'll build up to the bigger stuff. And of course, if you're willing to do the cheat codes that we talked about, that'll speed up the process. So we have a question from Lim. How does one become more confident in business? So that's we would need to know what type of business you're talking about. So we would need a little more specific example, but we're going to talk very generally here. So it's all about that phobia list and identifying exactly what is the outcome that you want. So once you've identified the financial outcome that you want, okay, I'm going to achieve it by means of business. What is that business? Is it freelancing? Is it starting a business? Going to be selling a product? And once you have that outcome in mind, let's get some tangible examples. Let's say you want to make $100,000 a year as a graphic designer. And I'm just throwing this example together. I'm not saying the numbers match up. Well, what are the things that you need to do to make that $100,000? Well, you're going to have to get a lot of clients. You're going to be able to sustain those clients, and you got to be able to know where to spend money to get more clients. So these are things that you probably don't know, and it may be holding you back from actually making that leap to do it. So get that phobic list out and categorize everything that stands in between you and your undertaking. Phobic, extremely uncomfortable, very uncomfortable, et cetera, like we talked about. And once you do that, just start steadily working your way up that list, and you'll build your confidence level up. Of course, that's just an example in that type of business, but it's a general principle that we're kind of really putting into place here. But if you want a more specific example of what you were talking about, feel free to drop that in the chat, and we can look at answering that. We'll also wait for about a minute or 2 to see if anyone has any additional questions or wants to come on the show. I needed that water more than I thought I did. Okay. So if anyone has any other questions, feel free to click that link. If not, we'll go ahead and call it quits because we are at the hour mark and some of y'all may not have eaten dinner, so wouldn't want to hold you up from chowing down. Okay. Yeah, it doesn't look like we have any additional questions, so we'll go ahead and close out this stream. If y'all do have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comment section. I'll be sure to get to those. Don't forget to subscribe if you're new and hit that thumbs up button if you found value in today's video. I will catch y'all in the next Financial Freedom Friday. Peace out.